Imagine a poster-sized display of the 10 Commandments in every public school classroom. Imagine taxpayer money being used to fund explicitly Catholic virtual schools. Imagine unlicensed religious chaplains hired to replace certified counselors for students. These aren't hypotheticals from a storybook. They're happening right now, in our schools, in our state, in our legislatures, and in our courtrooms. For generations, there's been a core principle that most Americans have taken for granted: the separation of church and state. But a coordinated, well-funded effort is well underway to not just blur that line, but to erase it completely. So what happened to the wall that was meant to protect our government from religious dogma and to protect our religion from government interference? What happens to a country when that wall comes crashing down?
You're listening to Uncle Sam Saves America, a patriotic show for the average Joe.
You see, maybe I'm old school. Since I'm Gen X, maybe I'm just a relic from days gone by. But I was raised and educated to believe that certain things should be kept separate. You do not mix bleach and ammonia. You do not mix oil and water in your car. And you do not mix religion and politics. The idea that church and state should be separate is so central to American identity that most Americans actually believe that the phrase wall of separation between church and state is in the Constitution. It's not, but the man who wrote it, Thomas Jefferson, was summarized in the spirit of the First Amendment. That amendment itself is clear. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The First Amendment expressly prohibits Congress from establishing a national religion and protects individuals' rights to practice their religion freely, or to practice no religion at all. This was never an attack on faith. In fact, many of the founders saw it as the only way to protect faith. Even George Washington, who called religion and morality indispensable supports for the nation, understood that this was a delicate balance. He saw personal faith as vital, but he also defended institutional separation. He famously wrote to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, promising that the U.S. government would give no bigotry, no sanction, to persecution, no assistance. When someone pushed him on why the Constitution didn't mention the word God, Washington basically just told him that true faith is so plain that it doesn't need much political help. So the goal was never to create a country that was hostile to religion, nor was it to create a country that follows a single religious doctrine. The founders knew that that is how holy wars are caused. It was to create a neutral government that protected every citizen's right to believe or not to believe according to their own conscience, free from state coercion. And now that foundational promise is being tested like it's never been tested before. The erosion of this principle is no longer a slow creep. It's full frontal assault, happening in our courtrooms, our state houses, and in school districts across the nation. Right? Take the case of St. Isidore of Seville, which was proposed as the country's first religious public charter school. In Oklahoma, the state approved a plan for a virtual school that would be funded fully by taxpayers, but run by the archdiocese, teaching Catholic curriculum. The state's own Republican Attorney General sued to block it, arguing that it was a flagrant violation of both Oklahoma and U.S. constitutions. And that case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and in May of 2025, it resulted in a deadlock, believe it or not. And the legal fight eventually came around and SCOTUS blocked it, forcing them to go be a private school. But that's the blueprint, right? That's what they're going to keep using, right? With copycats all over the place. And at the state level, the battles are even more direct. Right? In Louisiana, lawmakers passed a bill, House Bill 71, mandating that every single public classroom from kindergarten all the way through state-funded universities display the 10 Commandments in a large poster-sized format. The law was immediately challenged by a group of families from Catholic, Jewish, and secular backgrounds who argued that it was an obvious violation of the First Amendment. And the legal fight there is still ongoing, but the principle that was considered settled law 40 years ago, after the Supreme Court struck down a nearly identical law in 1980, is suddenly up for grabs again, right? In Texas, a law known as Senate Bill 763 now allows public schools to hire unlicensed religious chaplains to provide counseling and other services to students. And these positions can even be paid for with school funds. And during the debate about this, lawmakers shot down any amendments that would have required parental consent before a student could meet with a chaplain. They also rejected amendments that would have barred chaplains from trying to convert students. See, what Texas has done here with religion is no different than what California has done with transgenderism insofar as how it erodes parental rights. And these state-level battles aren't just isolated incidents either, right? They're a front line of a much larger, more ambitious vision of America. And it's all laid out in a 900-page document called Project 2025. Okay, now 2025, I've read most of it, right? I mean, it is 900 pages after all. Everything I've read, I agree with about 80% of Project 2025, but I draw the line whenever it breaks First Amendment rules. Right? Project 2025 is a detailed transition plan created by the Heritage Foundation for the next conservative presidential administration. It's a top-to-bottom blueprint for restructuring federal government, and its language on church and state is very, very concerning. Right? It explicitly states its goal is to create an executive branch that recognizes no line of institutional separation between church and state, let alone a wall. Its authors want to terminate rules that prevent religious organizations from discriminating while they receive federal money and funnel taxpayer dollars into private religious schools. Right? This isn't the reclaiming of America. This is no different than Marxism's current influence in academia. No different at all. It's just the polar opposite. Exactly what conservatives and true patriots have always fought against. This is the textbook definition of Christian nationalism, right? The belief that the U.S. is a Christian nation and that its laws and institutions must reflect one specific set of religious values, Christian values. Today, it's a vision of America where the line between church and state hasn't just been blurred, but it's been purposely and systematically erased. I mean, we've run this experiment before, right? I mean, and it ended in flames. The 30 Years' War in the 1600s started as a fight over whose version of Christianity would rule, the Catholics or the Protestants. And before it was over, a third of Central Europe was dead. Armies marched under holy banners, cities burned, famine, plague, dogs and cats playing together, all because rulers thought that they had the right to force you to worship a certain way. Right? The founding fathers, they knew this story. They remembered history, and they said, no, thank you, we're good. That's why Thomas Jefferson built the wall, to keep government out of God's business, because once state starts picking religious winners and losers, everybody's going to lose. So what does all this mean for a pluralistic democracy? Well, this isn't just another partisan squabble, right? It's a constitutional crisis that gets to the very heart of what America is supposed to be about. Between Zionism, Christian Zionism, evangelicals, Christian nationalism, Catholicism, and radical Islam, America's facing the greatest spiritual crisis of our time. And it's vital to understand, right, that the separation of church and state is not anti-religious. It's pro-freedom. It's designed to protect the integrity of both your faith and your government. The wall of separation was built by our forefathers to guarantee that freedom. Not freedom from religion, but freedom of religion. And freedom from a government that dictates what anyone else is allowed to believe. What are my hopes for America? Imagine a poster-sized display of the Bill of Rights in every public school classroom. Imagine taxpayer money being used to fund the return of vocational classes to high schools. Imagine students learning how to balance a checkbook and do their taxes. That's what I want. The wall of separation isn't just crumbling, right? It's being torn down brick by brick. The question is whether we, the people, are going to decide whether or not it's worth rebuilding. Anyway, thanks for listening to me today.
You're listening to Uncle Sam Saves America, a patriotic show for the average Joe.